Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege, joining you today live on Thursday, October 3rd, to start another week here in the NFL. Week 5 begins tonight with an NFC South showdown between the Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Should be a good game on tonight. We're going to preview that game and everything there is to do with that in a few seconds. Also on today's show, we're going to be looking at a few scenarios, the Dallas Cowboys being one of them, and what their injury situation is looking like with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Could those two injuries potentially derail their season with their upcoming schedule? And also down the line, we're going to be looking at what Garrett Wilson said and having some potential doubts about this New York Jets offense after their 10-9 loss to the Denver Broncos. That and much more coming up on today's show. So before we get started, as it has become tradition, obviously, I got to remind you of this great opportunity for you guys to get involved with the show. If you guys have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on anything going on in the NFL or anything I say, please, we want to hear about it. So your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your insights and your energy whenever you guys get involved with the show. So don't hesitate to drop anything, question, comment, or opinion in the chat box. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and I see it and it gets featured on the show, you can now use the new super chat feature just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the super chat button, and let's keep the show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Always appreciate you guys using that super chat feature. I always love hearing what you guys have to say about anything, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opinions or a lot of just anything going on with this game we have on tonight. The first thing we're going to talk about is this game between the Bucs and the Falcons. Like I mentioned, NFC divisional game between these two teams. The 3-1 Buccaneers played their first division game actually on the road tonight when they played the 2-2 Atlanta Falcons. And looking at these two teams over their last few games, Atlanta is coming off of their first divisional game and a first division win against the New Orleans Saints last week, 26-24 on a game-winning field goal by Younghoe Koo. And also for the Buccaneers, a massive win, very dominant win over the Philadelphia Eagles to maintain that hold over the division just for right now. And I mentioned just for right now just because if Atlanta were to win tonight, it would put them in first place of that division because they'd have the same record as the Buccaneers, but they'd be 2-0 within the division, whereas the Bucs would be 0-1. So that's the tiebreaker there within the divisional standing. So this is a big game for the Falcons to get hold of that first place spot after somewhat of a rough start, I guess, losing to the Steelers at home and then rebounding there, losing another one, then winning another one. Give and take a little bit of inconsistency there by the Falcons, but this is a great chance for them now to not only beat the Saints, but then also beat the Buccaneers in just the same week. So that's what's at stake tonight between these two teams. And looking at the Falcons first and foremost, we're going to look at some of the injuries, some injury news that they're dealing with. Their offensive tackle, Caleb McGarry, and Bijan Robinson are good to go tonight. Caleb McGarry missed last week's game, or Sunday's game, I should say, with a knee or an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken. And Bijan, there were some questions, I guess you could say, about a little nagging injury that he had. He didn't play. If you notice, Tyler Algier, I thought, played a bit more in their game against the Saints. So there is a little bit something there, I thought. But Bijan Robinson is good to go tonight. He's not going to be out or anything like that. But they will be without their starting linebacker, their tackling leader so far this year, Troy Anderson, because of a knee injury, and he is unavailable tonight. He's already inactive for tonight's game. And as much as we've highlighted Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates on this show plenty of times, Troy Anderson has been someone that has been outperforming, I think, a lot of people's expectations, and he's not going to be there tonight. He had a pick six against the Saints last on Sunday. So he's going to be a big miss, like I said, tackling leader for this team. So how they sort of plug that hole will be interesting to see. And going back to that Saints game, it was a big win, obviously, to jump over the Saints as well with the same record as them now. But that divisional record is what separates them. And now the Falcons are in second place while the Saints dropped to third. And breaking down some of these Falcons games, right, and kind of getting an idea of what kind of team they are, I guess you could say. What could we expect tonight? Looking at them, one of the things that jumped out at me most was that they've been in a lot of close games, a lot of one-score, two-score games, basically. 3 of Atlanta's first 4 games have been decided by 5 points or less, and they've all been decided by 1 score, technically, because the Steelers game is their biggest loss by 8 points, but still technically 1 score, right? You score once a touchdown, and then you convert the 2-point conversion. So all these games have been decided by 1 possession or less, and 3 of them have been decided by 5 points or less thus far. And last week, especially against the Saints, they made some great plays on special teams. On the defensive side of the ball, like I said, Troy Anderson getting that pick 6 to get the win, despite this offense scoring no touchdowns against the Saints. And I know the Saints have a good defense, credit to them, but still, I think with this offense, we're expecting more, right? Kirk's getting paid to play better than this. Drake London's a good weapon. They're just not, I guess, scoring at the rate I would think. Bijan Robinson, I think, is still definitely a lot more production to be tapped into, for sure, in my opinion. And I don't know, it just feels like something is off each and every game. Like the protection's not there, or the decision making's not there, or they just can't convert in the red zone. It always feels like there's something, and it's led to a lot of these close games so far. I'm not too worried about it, but still, it's something that I've noticed as sort of a trend now going forward. And if you look at it honestly, a little bit deeper than just these one-score games and getting a little bit fortunate, if not for those 2 Saints mistakes, Atlanta could have lost this game. If you only really take account the points they scored on offense, they would have scored 4 field goals by Younghoe Koo, and the Saints could have won this game, not easily, but still with a greater margin, right? If you think about it like that in hindsight, right? Obviously, but they just need to be more efficient, better decision making. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a top 10 scoring offense, so it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works with their defense, how successful they'll be in stopping the Bucs, and if they'll be able to keep up with them if the Bucs are on it today. And that brings me over to the Buccaneers, right? Whereas the Falcons are only missing 1 person tonight, the Bucs are missing a whole lot of guys, right? Kalijah Cansey is still not able to play. Antoine Winfield also obviously not going to play. Trey Palmer, who scored a touchdown last week, he's out with a concussion. And Jalen McMillan, also the rookie wide receiver who could have gotten more snaps tonight, is also ruled out tonight. And their starting right tackle is not playing tonight as well. So definitely dealing with some more hurdles, but they just steamrolled the Eagles last week behind a decent run game between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. So that was something to build off of as a positive. Their passing game got a lot better too after that game against the Broncos. Mike Evans played a lot better, and they definitely need it going into this game, because if you're not going to have some of your best playmakers, if this running game has sort of kind of picked it up a little bit, it is something you could lean on, definitely, if Troy Anderson is not playing, but we'll see how successful they'll be on that. And this is the Bucs offense that's scored 20-plus points in all games except 1, and 2 games they've had of 33-plus points as well. So they could definitely score when it looks like they're playing pretty decent. They could put up some points. So I'm very interested to see how this all plays out with the dynamic of their defense maybe not being so good. The Falcons missing a critical piece on their defense. You're looking at some of the matchups I'm looking at, and definitely looking at Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier going up against this Bucs run defense. Their run defense isn't that great. I think it's somewhere like middle of the NFL, pretty much. Not much higher than that. So Bijan, how much can he take advantage of it? How much are both of them used in their running game? Can the Falcons get something going through them? And just in general for both of these teams, the red zone defense, against both of these teams' offenses. Who is going to convert on touchdowns and not just field goals, right? Because the Falcons get into scoring position a lot, but like last week, they just don't convert on them. So who's going to convert 3 points into 7 points more often, I think is going to be huge. And Mike Evans going up against this Atlanta secondary. While it got better, Mike Evans in the past has had success against the Falcons. In 18 games against Atlanta, he has 92 receptions for over 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns, which is the fourth most receiving yards against any opponent among active players right now. So that is something to keep an eye on. How well do the Falcons try and cover him? Who else benefits off of that, trying to get open that way? It's all going to be played out tonight. And to get to my predictions now, finally, it's so tough because I want to pick the Falcons because the Bucs are dealing with so many injuries. The Bucs defense isn't really that great, but it's not like the Falcons have been scoring like 25 plus points, right? I just mentioned that their offense didn't score a touchdown last week, and there have been other moments where they died out in the second half against the Chiefs. It's very worrying to me, and the Bucs offense is actually very good, but the fact that they don't have Trey Palmer and the fact that they don't have Jalen McMillan to sort of step in for him, it's such a toss-up right now. I'm pretty sure the Falcons are favored in this game, so I'm going to go with the Bucs. I think I'm going to go with the Bucs just because I feel like I can trust their offense a little bit more in this game to kind of just not go stale. The Saints had some success against this Falcons defense last week. Passing-wise, Chris Olave played well. Raheem Shaheed had a decent game, so I'm feeling like the Bucs are going to be able to put up enough points to kind of mask some of those injuries on defense. And also, I just feel like Todd Bowles is going to blitz the heck out of Kirk Cousins. So that'll help if it gets home. And I'm going to go with the Bucs. I think I'm just going to go with the Bucs just barely here. We'll see. That game's set to kick off at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, so not too long after this show goes off of the air. So we'll make sure to go and watch that game and report back tomorrow. But that'll be the first segment on today's show. Coming up after the break, we're going to look at the Dallas Cowboys. They are also dealing with injuries of their own to Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. With those injuries and with the upcoming schedule, is this season already kind of looking like it's in the bins now, basically, right? Are we at a point where we're not feeling too hot with these next couple opponents coming up for the Cowboys? I'll give my thoughts on that after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into this topic on the Dallas Cowboys. Not a lot of injuries, significant injuries that the Cowboys are dealing with going into their next couple of games. They just managed to get over a bad New York Giants team. The score was closer than it really should have been. 20-15, it was exactly last Thursday when the Cowboys went over to MetLife. They beat the Giants, and with how CeeDee Lamb performed, with how that offense was, moving the ball pretty well, and how people viewed this game as sort of a get-right game for the Cowboys after they lost to the Saints and how they lost to the Ravens. This was a great opportunity for them in a lot of people's minds that they could go out there, smack the Giants around, and it could get some more confidence boosted into them. But, you know, it was only a 5-point game. Now they're 2-2, which is great, but now it's kind of crazy to think that we're entering into the hardest part of their schedule, where this game should have been that confidence booster, right? I felt like a lot of people walked away thinking nothing new about this Cowboys team, or maybe even feeling worse that they only beat the Giants by 5 points. And now the worst news coming from that game, not only was it the fact that it was a close game, but also they lost DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons to some pretty significant injuries, right? Starting with DeMarcus Lawrence, he's expected to be out 4 to 8 weeks because of a Liz Frank injury in his foot. Not a complete fracture or anything like that, but it's just a injury that he suffered in that game against the Giants to the Liz Frank joint in his foot. It doesn't require surgery or anything like that, but he will be placed on the IR and he'll have to miss the next 4 games before he is eligible to come back off of that. So that's a huge loss, obviously, to the weaker side of their team. And just like DeMarcus Lawrence, you know, Micah Parsons also was hurt in this game. It looked like he got his ankle rolled up on against the Giants and he was sort of carted off. And it said that he is dealing with a high ankle sprain. And I think he was seen with a walking boot at some point this week and sort of riding around on a scooter as well. So, you know, high ankle sprains, any sort of ankle injury are always kind of weird. And you don't really know how, it sounds kind of weird, just how fully fit they might be. They might be eligible to come back, but it always is one of those injuries, like a hamstring injury or something like that, that just makes me nervous. Because it always feels like within a season, with the wear and tear on the ankles, the tackling and everything like that, and obviously the high intense running with a hamstring injury, it always feels like it could just pop up at any given moment. So that's what makes me the most nervous about the Micah Parsons injury, even if he might come back earlier than DeMarcus Lawrence. I just feel a little bit unsure of how he'll look when he returns. And then you also have the Brandon Cooks injury. Not really an injury, but just he has been ruled out because he was ruled out yesterday as he recovers from a procedure, a second procedure that he had on his knee. The first procedure, follow me here, was last week against the New York Giants. After the game, he stayed in New York to have a procedure to kind of address an issue in his knee that he was dealing with during training camp. But when he returned to Dallas a few days later, there wasn't something really sitting right. He had a second procedure, and there was actually an infection in there from the first one. So after he went in there, got it all cleared out, he has been ruled out because of that second procedure. So it's not like a muscle injury or anything like that. I expect him to be out at most. Obviously, this week he's already been ruled out, but at most next week, and then he should be back good to go. But those are 3 significant pieces to this team. And now I mentioned their schedule and how they're going to have to face this grueling schedule without 3 of their best players, right? You look at the games they have coming up. We have this week, week 5, at Pittsburgh. Then you come home the following week, week 6, against the Detroit Lions. Then you have a bye week, which is very good for them considering the injuries. Then you come back and you travel to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Then after that, you travel to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Then you're at home for the next 2 weeks, week 10 against the Eagles, and then week 11 at home again against the Houston Texans. And before that, you wrap it all up with a week 12 game at Washington. And without a doubt, these next games that I just mentioned there are without a doubt their toughest period within their schedule. And I don't know for sure in any of these matchups where Dallas can sort of just walk in there and we can confidently say that, oh, they should be favored in this game, or they should be able to exploit this part of whatever team they're playing that week and think that they're going to be able to just win that game. None of these games are screaming or even just saying, just in general, how maybe the Cowboys can win this game. Now, with that being said, I don't think there's any game that they should win, but there are closer matchups like this week against Pittsburgh. Maybe they could squeeze it out if the Steelers defense doesn't get it together. Or maybe against the Lions, they lost to the Bucs. Maybe there's a chance there. The 49ers, they're 2-2. They lost to a very injured-riddled Rams team, and they also lost to the Vikings. They're not unbeatable, is what I'm trying to say. The Falcons, a little bit shaky. I just talked about their offense not being very efficient. That's a close matchup if you can convince yourself of that. The Eagles, it looks like they're eating themselves up from the inside out with the problems that they have internally, but they're still very talented. You could look at that matchup as a closer game. And the last one is Washington also. Are you a true believer? By the time they play the Commanders in Week 12, we're going to have a better idea of what this team is, but so far so good for them. They're 3-1 and they're leading that division. Those are the closer games that I mentioned, right? I know I threw Detroit in there, but I don't give them any sort of chance against Detroit. San Francisco, same thing. I mentioned them, but it's in San Fran. Probably some of the injured guys are going to come back. I don't know about Christian McCaffrey, but they're still very good, and the Cowboys have had a very tough time stopping the run, obviously. So none of these games are screaming that the Cowboys should win them. If any of these games, I don't know where they would get a win, honestly. At best, I could see a 6-5 record out of these matchups, right? And that's best case scenario if they beat the Steelers, if they beat the Falcons, if they beat the Eagles, and if they beat the Commanders. I'm not even gonna predict or project that they could beat any of these other teams. I'm giving them 4 wins, 4 to 5 wins there, and those are maybes at best. So I could see at best a 6-5 record coming out of these games over the next 11 games or so, and that's best case scenario, like I said, and it could potentially be worse because of the fact that there's going to be definitely no DeMarcus Lawrence for a good amount of these. Micah Parsons, again, touchy injury, very delicate as well, so I don't know when he is actually going to be feeling 100% to come back. And Brandon Cooks isn't going to be in Pittsburgh or potentially even against the Lions. So, these injuries are coming at the worst possible time for the Lions. And what's interesting about all these teams as well, if you really look at them, all of these teams can sort of match and line up face-to-face against the Dallas Cowboys' best positions that they have available, in my opinion, right? You look at the best positions right now for the Cowboys are quarterback with Dak, CeeDee Lamb, obviously, Jake Ferguson, and when they're healthy, Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence. Those are their best positions right now on that entire team. And you look at all these teams, and they can match up very well with all of those positions, right? The Steelers would be the closest one. Justin, you'd obviously take Dak over Justin. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, closer. Some people might take CeeDee Lamb. Tight end, Pat Freiermuth or Jake Ferguson, pretty much the same thing. And edge rushers, TJ and Micah, among those lines, right? But then everywhere else, you might still be in favor of those other teams' skill positions, like I said. Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. In San Francisco, same thing. Debo, Brandon, George Kittle, just CeeDee Lamb on the Dallas Cowboys side of things. Elsewhere, on the Falcons, Kirk and Dak Prescott, Drake London, you'd probably take CeeDee Lamb over him. But tight end, you'd probably take Kyle Pitts. Edge rushers, probably the Cowboys, still very close. The Eagles have talent all over the place. Same thing with them. Houston, same situation, and the Commanders, the way they've looked right now, probably a lot closer than you think. So with all the advantages the Cowboys might have with those positions, all these teams are very well equipped to also match them in those spots. And not only that, all of these teams love to run the ball. They run the ball very well, or they're at least very committed to doing it throughout the entire course of the game, which hasn't spelled out a great result for the Dallas Cowboys over the last few weeks. So to kind of look at the question now, are they able to overcome these injuries to sort of keep them afloat throughout the rest of this schedule and be in a position where we're still talking about them like a playoff team? I would have to say probably not. I just don't know where I would see any sort of silver lining for them for me to think that like 6-5 is as best as I could give them. That would be their record at that point in time by week 11 or week 12. So, that's still an okay record, but it's basically what they have right now. And, that could be best case scenario, but you could be looking at also like probably 8-loss team by then if you give them some 3 losses as well. And then from that point on, with the way the NFC is going, it doesn't look great at this point in time. So the worst part about this team, and I'll say it again to kind of wrap it up here, I don't give them that much of a chance because the main reason is that they're usually when you're like 2-2 or something like that, like take the 49ers or something, right? They're 2-2, or the Rams, they're 1-3. They're waiting for guys to come back. So it kind of gives you a little bit of hope, right? Or the Browns with Nick Chubb. But this team, the worst part about it is that we've already seen them at their best. No one is coming back to save them or significantly increase their performance, right? Right now, when Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence come back, that's going to be a big help. But we've already seen this version for the first 3 to 4 weeks. So that version is average at best. They're 2-2, right? The record speaks for themselves. So with them now gone, it could get even worse if that is even possible, right? So the worst part about them is that we kind of already know what kind of team they are, whereas other contending teams are getting better. Some are getting worse and are going to begin to fall off. But with the Cowboys, it's the same story. We've seen this movie before, and they're not going to get any better than what we've already seen. That's the scariest and worst part about this, and why I am very doubtful that they could have a winning record after these next couple of games. It's not looking great. It's going to start with Pittsburgh, and if they could win this one, it's going to be a huge help, because after that, like I said, the Lions, the 49ers on the road in Atlanta, the Eagles in there, the Texans as well. It's not looking great for the next couple of weeks. So if they could get this game in Pittsburgh, it's going to be huge. But even then, I don't think they would even win that game. So we'll reevaluate them after this upcoming week. But it's definitely looking pretty dreadful for the Cowboys now heading into these next couple of weeks. And speaking of dreadful, doubtful situations, we have to talk about the Jets. Coming up after the break, their star wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, had some things to say about how this offense is operating right now. He talked pretty openly on a radio show this week about this offense and their lack of creativity. So we're going to go into what he said and how worried should we be and whether or not he's right to be worried about this Jets offense. So that is coming up in just a few seconds. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, we go from talking about the Dallas Cowboys and them coming off a win, but still suffering more losses than they got positives from that win. We're going to talk and transition now to the New York Jets. They're coming off of a loss, but still, it hasn't really looked exactly how we would have thought it would so far for the New York Jets, right? When Aaron Rodgers comes in, obviously we're thinking massive improvement, significant control and command of this offense where we haven't seen anything like it from the New York Jets over the last few years. And, week one went as it did. You're in San Francisco against a Super Bowl reaching team in the 49ers consistently over the last few years. the offense kind of died off after a drive or two, and, we attributed that to maybe some rust getting accommodated to everybody, right? No Mike Williams, really. It was Aaron Rodgers' first game, really, with the New York Jets in the regular season, so that one we kind of just swiped away. Week 2, it looked a little bit better. You got the win this time, but still, there were things to improve. And then week 3, against the New England Patriots, it looked like they had figured everything out, right? It looked like they had figured out some sort of formula to generate these kind of performances, right? From their offense, their running game with Breece Hall, also Garrett Wilson looked pretty solid. That's where or at least that's where I thought we were going to be going throughout the rest of these weeks with the New York Jets. Anthony Manzano, in your honest opinion, what is the earliest you think a player should come back from an ACL injury like Jalen Phillips had last year? Because I felt he came back way too soon, and also they might be getting Davante Adams apparently. On Davante Adams, they certainly need him. I don't know if he's going to help out that quarterback situation. I know Tua's probably going to come back, but they still have Odell Beckham to come back too. So I don't know how they'd all make that work and what they'd be willing to give up. A second-round pick for them, maybe. I mean, no one's going to say no to Davante, but I don't think he'd go there. Or I don't think they'd offer the Raiders a better package than some of these other teams. And in terms of an ACL, yeah, Jalen Phillips definitely came back a lot earlier. I would agree with you than I thought. And I honestly thought that he probably was going to come back and miss maybe the first 4 weeks, if I'm being honest, because I think he got hurt around like Christmas or something like that, right? Or like November. So to come back before the season even started does seem a little bit rushed, but I would definitely have said at least a year or like 10 months or something like that to come back as quickly as he did. He ruptured his Achilles, so I guess that's the difference. But even still, way too early, I would agree with you. And that just felt like a devastating blow, as if they needed anything else to kind of go wrong, right? No, the Jets might get Davante Adams. Yes, all right, I got you. Yeah, the Jets will definitely get him. I think that one's way too obvious to not happen, right? Rodgers has mentioned it. Davante keeps getting asked about it. And of course, the Jets need him the most right now because they're the most win-now team. And with what I am gonna talk about with Garrett Wilson, it's gonna help their offense out a lot because of the fact that the relationship there with Davante and Aaron, and they already have Nathaniel Hackett there. They have Alan Lazard there. So bringing in Aaron Rodgers' best friend is gonna make this go a lot smoother of a transition than it appears to be going right now. And also, the worst thing that could happen is that he goes somewhere else, and then Aaron Rodgers is pretty, ticked off about that, and you don't want that getting in the way of anything, right? So I think it's too obvious for him not to go to the Jets at this point, but it's just a matter of when, right? And yeah, he got injured Thanksgiving, so I would have at least thought he was going to come back in October. So, regardless of how that procedure went, he obviously felt good enough. I'm sure he got the medical green light to come back. So I don't know. Those are always varying, ideas, opinions on how and when a player should come back. I would have held out longer, but the Dolphins definitely needed him to come back. So now, sticking to the Jets, off of your question about Davante and the Jets also. Garrett Wilson had some interesting things to say about this offense, right? Because we've looked at it so far, and this loss to the Denver Broncos did not look good at all. There was no run game. Aaron Rodgers missed some throws. The weather was bad, but that's really no excuse because they had extra time to prepare, not only for any quarterback, for a rookie quarterback. And I know they missed some field goals here or there and things like that, but it's a game you have to win. It's a game you have to win. Do you think that means the Jets don't believe that Garrett Wilson is a number one receiver if they're trying to trade for Davante Adams? I don't think it necessarily means that they're giving up on him or anything like that, or that they don't believe he's a number one. But what separates the Jets from all these other teams is that they have a 40 to 41-year-old quarterback, right? He's not going to be able to play for probably the next 3 to 4 years, if maybe the next year. So they need to get the best out of things right now. And it was unfortunate that he got hurt last year, where they could have ironed out a lot of these injuries. But they're feeling the pressure now, right? They're 2-2, and the pressure that everybody has on them right now, it's either divisional round, conference championship, or a lot of people are going to get fired, right? So that urgency, that pressure to make this work is why I think more so they want to get Davante Adams in here to make this as much of a juggernaut team as they can, to try everything they can at least. And if they fail, they've tried everything, right? It's not like they missed out on Davante Adams, right? They went out, they got him, and if it doesn't work out still, you did everything possible to make it work out. And then that way, if you get fired, it's not for a lack of trying, right? So that's really what separates the Jets from maybe the Saints or the Steelers or even, the Commanders, right? They're all sort of building a team, whereas the Jets have this year and maybe next year to get something out of this team before they kind of, blow it all up. So it alludes to the fact also that, Patrick, now, what do you think about the Bengals kicker, Johnny? That's a good one. That's funny. That's a funny one. Back to Garrett Wilson. That's where I was going. He was on the Bart and Hahn radio show this week to voice his concerns about this Jets offense. And he had a lot to say, so we're going to go through it and just bear with me because there are some things that I picked out from here that I thought were very loud apart from everything that he said. He said, "I don't think we do a lot of different stuff, to be honest. I watch football on Sundays and I see a lot of teams mix it up and stuff like that. I don't think we do that. I think we know our identity. It's just about going out and executing it or figuring out if it's going to work. I don't think we're trying a lot of different things. I know personally my route tree hasn't been what it has been the last 2 years as far as the stuff I've been running. It's just about figuring out if it's the right identity and whether it's going to win games." And it's a lot of things I pulled out from that, but to go back to you guys a little bit off topic with the reports coming from Adam Schefter that Tua probably is going to come back week 8 with the serious concussions he had. Do you think it would be safe for the Dolphins maybe to keep them off the field till week 11 or 12? I would probably opt for that option. For him to come back week 8, I know he's not feeling any symptoms or anything like that, but it's it's happened a couple times now, and I know it's his decision and everything like that, and in a way, the Dolphins, don't have a right to be like, we don't want you to come back, right? He's under contract and they're paying him a ton of money. If he's good to go and he wants to play and, there's no issues medically, it's a weird situation where you almost have to put him back out there. But also you have to gauge the context of how your season's going, right? If they don't win another game by week 8, week 9, and there's 1-8 or something like that, 1-7, then there's almost no point of bringing Tua back, right? Because of the medical history and the record, you're not going to come back and make the playoffs by being 2-6 or 1-7 or something like that. So that's also going to be an important factor. But keeping him off the field till week 11 or 12, that's going to depend a lot if they're able to win a couple of these games with Tyler Huntley or anybody else that they want to throw back there. So that's still, to be determined right now as of Tua and when he should come back. If they're competing and they have a chance, then you have to think about the idea of how quickly do you bring him back to get better and not just be teetering right now on whether or not you're performing well and how close your quarterback can come back as well. So that's kind of where I stand on that. And, Garrett, some of the important things he said out of this entire statement was the fact that the part where he says it's just about going out and executing it or figuring out if it's going to work. And that, to me, all it's saying is that he has serious doubts about what they're doing is actually efficient, is actually benefiting them as a whole. It's one thing to say that it's just taken a while for us to get acclimated. It's a whole other thing to say that maybe he's doubtful that they're even doing the right thing, right? That's what I took from that. And also the part where he says, my route tree hasn't been what it has been over the last 2 years. And if you really think about that, Nathaniel Hackett was there last year, so it's not really solely on him, but the idea that the route tree and his production might be different or even worse than it has been the last 2 years is insane, because he's had Zach Wilson, and I don't know if he's had Zach for 2 years or maybe just 1 year, but regardless of the fact, he has Aaron Rodgers now. And for these injuries to be popping up right now when your quarterback is 10 times better than the situations you've had before is a problem, right? You can't have Garrett decrease in a role when you got that much better with your quarterback and Aaron Rodgers, right? I'm not going to sit here and freak out about the situation like it's done, like they're not going to get this together. This is essentially the first time they've played in the regular season together, so we can cut them a bit of slack there, but he's on pace right now to have 764 yards, which is a big decrease for a level of wide receiver that he is, coming off of his first 2 years. So that's a bit concerning. He only has 1 touchdown so far in the year. And it's just about, really, for me, getting on the right page with Aaron Rodgers. They're only basically 4 games into it. For as much as the offseason can benefit a wide receiver and a quarterback, being in these moments in regular seasons is going to be a lot different. It just is. And for Garrett and Rodgers through 4 games to look all right, kind of disappointing, they can only go up from here. I expect them to get better from this point on, and Garrett's too good of a wide receiver for him to be questioning this offense. Yeah, it might be a little bit old school with, how he mentions that they don't mix things up or use motion, basically. And, that's just how Aaron Rodgers operates. So they're not going to change the offense and tell Rodgers to run a different offense because he's only going to be here a limited amount of time. So that's out the window. I think it's just a matter of time and Garrett getting accustomed to it, and it's going to work out, at least from this aspect. And the other issues with this team is, offensive line. Sometimes their running game didn't look good in the game against the Broncos, so they have a lot of other things also to figure out. They're at a critical point now, too, where they're playing the Vikings and then they play the Bills, I believe. So if things don't go right, the sky's going to be falling in New York, because this team could be 2-4, or if they win one of these next 2 games, it still will be where we're at right now. So Garrett, interesting comments made from him. It's definitely going to be a situation to monitor going forward, because this is the catalyst for everything they do on offense, right? Garrett and Rodgers is going to be huge in any sort of success they want to have. So how they get over these problems is going to be certainly something to watch as we go on. But speaking about moving on, we have 2 more topics to get to. We're going to preview another game that I think is fascinating between the Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals after this next break. And also, to close out the show, we're going to be giving you guys my game picks for Week 5. Only part 1, only the first 6 games, and then we're going to finish it off tomorrow with the other half. So a lot more to get to still. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to preview another one of these games in Week 5 that kind of flew over my head, and I didn't know that it was going to take place already in this season in the NFL, but the first AFC North matchup, right? Being a Steelers fan, keeping track of all these games and matchups, this is going to be a good one for a couple of reasons, right? It's the first one of the year, and Baltimore will be traveling to Cincinnati in a big game for both of these teams, right? After coming off of big wins last year, the Ravens having a big statement win over the Buffalo Bills at home, the Bengals finally getting their first win of the season, albeit against the Panthers. It's a start. They need to get their first win somewhere relatively soon, so that was big for them. And now The Ravens enter with an even 2-2 record, and the Bengals enter this game 1-3. And why I wanted to highlight this matchup is because of the high stakes that come with it as well. Because potentially more than any other game this week, this one has the highest of stakes in my opinion, because we're talking about if the Cincinnati Bengals win, they're going to be 2-3, same record as the Ravens, obviously, but they'd be able to jump ahead of them because they're 1-0 in the division rather than 0-1 like the Ravens would be, and it would be a big hit for the Ravens after their win against the Bills to now be in third place in the division and with a losing record. That's pretty important, obviously. And then in the other way, for the Ravens to kind of keep stacking these wins to beat the Bills and then beat the Bengals on the road is a great way to build even more momentum, obviously, going forward. And also for the Bengals, if they were to lose, they'd be 0-1 in the division, obviously, and they'd be 1-4. And in this division, in the AFC as well overall, 1-4 is a very dire place to be. And it's not going to get too much easier as well for them based on that fact. So there's a lot at stake here. I truly believe that. We had Joe Burrow even saying this week at some point that he has to be darn near perfect against the Baltimore Ravens in this game. They're obviously feeling the attention, the pressure of this game, and that's why I think it's going to be such a must-watch game. So going into both of these teams, right, starting off with the Bengals, looking at some injuries that they're kind of dealing with. They have a knee injury to deal with for Mike Hilton. He's been listed as questionable. I know he didn't practice yesterday. I wasn't able to catch the injury reports on today. Trey Hendrickson is dealing with a neck injury. He's also questionable. And Jermaine Pratt dealing with another injury. He is also questionable right now. Those are big pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Clearly the weaker side for the Bengals. So hopefully all these guys can play because they're definitely going to need them. And even though their first win came last week against the Panthers, they finally at least got in the win column, right? That's the most important thing. After the first 3 weeks, to finally see yourself win a game is huge mentally, I think. After the first couple games, you felt that maybe you were wronged or that you just didn't play well. You came out flat against the Patriots, and then against the Commanders, you didn't maybe necessarily think you played bad. It's just that you maybe ran out of time. So all those things kind of take a toll on you. So to finally see a win in that column is huge for this team, I believe, going forward. And also over the last 2 weeks, T. Higgins has been looking better. There's been more of an impact from him in the games, a little bit against the Commanders, but a lot more against the Panthers. And the running game is something that is slowly getting a lot of people's attention with Chase Brown and with Zach Moss. That seems to be the best piece of news from last week and also the game against the Commanders, that they did lose, but it was a positive sign for this team because there hasn't been a real running game to complement Joe Burrow in week 1 and week 2, but then in week 3 against the Commanders, they had 124 total rushing yards. They lost, but it is a better sign. Then they had 141 rushing yards total last week between Chase Brown and Zach Moss. So against the Ravens, you can't be one-dimensional. You just can't be all about Joe Burrow, all about Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins as well. They're not really going to get anywhere doing that. The more you can involve these running backs and the more you can have a well-balanced game like they had against the Chiefs, I think is going to bode much well for them in this matchup. And again, huge stakes, obviously, because of the record with a win and the record without a win. You could significantly get better and closer to these other teams or really be further back from not only the division but the entire AFC. Not a lot of teams are or have 4 in the losing column already. I only believe it's the Jaguars up until now. A couple teams are 1-3, but you don't want to be grouped up with them. So now that's why this game matters so much for the Bengals. And now looking at the Ravens, they're coming in relatively healthy. They're not really dealing with too much in terms of injuries. All of their big name players should be good to go. And now it's crazy how this dynamic flips, right? Because before you had people sort of worrying them of what kind of team they were going to be, their identity, and whether or not, this Derrick Henry trade or scenario was really going to flourish as we believed it would be. But now, a couple weeks removed from that, we're talking about them being the best team in the NFL now, which is it's crazy, and it's awesome talking about the NFL and how everything switches from week to week. But still, yeah, it's just crazy how that whole narrative and idea has turned on the Ravens, and to their credit, right? Because they've made people change their mind now and realize that they're pretty much still the same team that they were last year, and they got better adding Derrick Henry. And now, off of that mention of Derrick Henry, you had the win last week, and not only last week against the Bills, but also against the Cowboys, and how dominant they were with that running game. It's made their defense look a lot better, and that's really what I loved seeing and taking away from those games, right? Because not only did the offense finally click, but also I was having my doubts about this defense a little bit, right? Why were they continuously giving up big leads? How did they lose to the Raiders? Were they going to let the Cowboys come back on them? It was looking a little bit shaky how easily teams were moving the ball on them, but I think finding this new method, idea with Derrick Henry and how much you use him throughout the entirety of the game, it's helped out their defense a lot. Kyle Hamilton's making some plays now more. Their corners are playing a lot better, shutting down all the Bills wide receivers last week. So I think those go hand in hand, very much so, with how this defense plays when they're running the ball very well, obviously, or how they look when their offense isn't really getting anything together and they're on the field a lot more often. So that's really what I love the most about watching the Ravens over the last 2 weeks. And also, the stakes for them, like I mentioned before, it's either go back to being under 500, or you get closer, one game away basically, to the Steelers and potentially taking the lead away from them. So that's what each of these teams are playing for. And now, with that being said, we're going to look at some of the things that will determine this matchup, right? With some of the matchups directly. The first one being the Cincinnati defensive line, obviously going up against Derrick Henry. The Bengals are dealing with some injuries there. I don't know if their defensive tackle is necessarily going to play in this game. I know he's been out the last couple of weeks, so we'll see if he's able to play. Trey Hendrickson, I mentioned, has a neck injury, so whether or not he's going to play. Jermaine Pratt also is another one, very much going to be involved against Derrick Henry. So how do all those guys look, and are they able to make it to this game? And can they stop Derrick Henry is ultimately the question. That's going to be a huge matchup. Who's more successful in that? Then also, with the Bengals, predominantly I think still being a pass-first team, the matchup between T. Higgins and Jamar Chase going up against the Baltimore Ravens defensive backs like Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, and these guys, how do they match up well against them, and can they stifle them like they did last week against the Buffalo Bills? A lot, because their offense jumped up to a huge lead, so that kind of plays along with that factor. And also now, what I found also as a takeaway from that Bills game was the amount of pressure that Baltimore defensive line had on Josh Allen. They did a very good job of still keeping him contained and forcing him into a lot of difficult throws. He made a lot of them, but those are throws that you kind of just live with. So can they do the same with Joe Burrow now and make him uncomfortable, move the pocket for him, make him have lapses of judgment with pressure in his face and him just trying to get it away? All of those are going to be important factors in this game. And now, looking at some of the questions sort of that kind of transition off of these factors are which running game will be the more dominant and have the most time of possession. That's something I'm interested in seeing. While the Bengals are just now getting the running game going, Derrick Henry, obviously, and how well he's played so far, is going to be fascinating how much the Bengals stick with the running game, how much do the Bengals stick with it if they find themselves down. All of that is going to be super interesting to watch. Then also, we have to mention the performances of Lamar and Joe Burrow, two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Which quarterback is going to do enough or potentially more to kind of help their team in this game and kind of lead them to victory? We saw Joe Burrow play one of, if not his best game of the year against the Chiefs in that direct matchup against Patrick Mahomes, and they were the better team. They just kind of shot themselves in the foot with that last play. So can Joe Burrow do it again at home against Lamar? That's going to be really a good matchup to watch. And the last thing I'll be looking at is which team sort of goes out and proves the point. Which team wants to prove a point more and is successful in doing so. Essentially how each of these teams win is something I'm going to be looking at, right? Whether or not the Ravens can stack 2 wins against 2 good teams, or if the Bengals want this win bad enough to go out and shock everybody by beating the Ravens and close that gap, have the same record as them, and get closer and be in second place now actually in the division. Which one of these teams is going to want it more? But with that being said now, on my picks and who I think is going to win this game, I think I'm going to go with Baltimore because of my doubts with the Cincinnati Bengals defense. They allowed 104 rushing yards to Chuba Hubbard, 108 rushing yards total to the Washington Commanders, and 90 rushing yards to Isaiah Pacheco over the last 3 games. And all those guys are great. None of them are Derrick Henry, obviously, right? So, you got a different beast coming in here in Cincinnati, and you haven't been too successful against the other guys, so I can't imagine you're going to be better against a better running back and a run-heavy team. So that's really the main idea with this, and I just feel like the Ravens defense has kind of found themselves now after last week's performance, and holding the Buffalo Bills to 10 points, I think, was a resounding, turnout and statement made there. I like the Ravens defense obviously a lot more, and like Joe Burrow said, I feel like the Bengals have to be perfect in this game where it doesn't leave a lot of margin of error, and I think the Ravens are going to force them into spots where that margin of error, that discipline that they have is really going to be tested, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep it throughout the entire game and be perfect the entire game to muster out a win here. So with that, I feel like the Ravens just have a slight advantage off of their last win and how Derrick Henry looks. I'll take the Ravens in this game. Unfortunately, the Bengals will fall to 1-4, and with the easiest schedule in that division, it's shocking pretty much. But that's who I'm going with. And on that topic, on picking games, the last segment we have on today's show are some of my game picks for Week 5. We're going to go through about 6 games here to close out the show and tell you who I'm picking to win in this game and why that is. So make sure to stay tuned for this last segment. We'll be right back in just a few seconds. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, jumping into some of the matchups from Week 5. I got about half of the game slate on here from Sunday. We're going to go through this first half, and then tomorrow, to close out the week, we're going to go through the other 6 games as well, splitting it up as we've become accustomed to doing. So without further ado, we're going to get into that exact game pick and deciding who's going to win out of these 6 matchups that I have on here. These are the first 6 that we're going to go through, and starting off on the top left, we're going to talk about the Packers and the Los Angeles Rams. More high-stakes games for this one. Like we just mentioned with the Ravens and the Bengals, there's some high stakes in this one as well. The Packers trying to keep pace with the Lions, who are looking impeccable, at least on offense. The Vikings are still perfect on the year, so trying to keep pace with them, not falling too far behind them, is going to be huge. They stand at 2-2 right now, and the Lions are 3-1, obviously, and the Vikings are 4-0. London against the Jets, so I'm expecting them to win that game. You don't want to fall too far behind here. And for the Rams, also another idea of keeping pace with their division. If they fall to 1-4, the way the Seahawks are looking at 3-1, we know the 49ers are going to get better, and even the Cardinals are giving you some sort of life on offense as well. So falling to 1-4 with how the NFC is going as well, it's not the place to be with a team that's just really unlucky with injuries. So there's going to be more Jordan Love in this game. Obviously, he came back against the Vikings, and he almost completed that comeback, but it wasn't enough in the end. And the Rams, like I said, have to play more of a perfect game, I believe, against the Packers because of injuries. They need more plays, more big-time plays like they had against the 49ers if they're going to get some of these wins against good teams. So I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I know it's not their fault, obviously, dealing with these injuries, but they're going to require more out of guys like Tutu Atwell and Whittington and Demarcus Robinson and guys like that. A young defense as well. I think it's too much to ask, almost like it was for the Bengals, and having to be perfect. It's not going to be a consistent thing in the NFL. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the Packers to win on the road and kind of take advantage of that young defense and be more efficient with the ball, specifically Jordan Love, and keeping it and not turning it over as much. Then moving down the line, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. I believe this is the first time these two teams have met on primetime on Sunday night, so that's pretty exciting, adding to the allure of two of the biggest franchises, if not the two biggest, in the NFL over its history. So that's the intrigue of it. And, the Cowboys are coming off of an extra period of rest, but it's ironic how they're dealing with more significant injuries than the Steelers. We mentioned that in the second segment. And, just somehow they're more injured. DeMarcus Lawrence is on the IR. Micah's dealing with that high ankle sprain. And, with that being the case, not looking favorable for them, CeeDee Lamb and Dak have been pretty impeccable, at least last week against the Giants. So they have some momentum going there. It looks like they figured that out. And the Steelers, on the other side, are coming off of their first loss, more so on their wrongdoings than I don't like to take credit away from the Colts because they did play a great game, but I felt like if there wasn't that fumble by Justin Fields or George Pickens, and their defense could have made one or two more stops, that unnecessary roughness call on Minkah Fitzpatrick was as bogus as you can get in the NFL. If one of those things swings their way, I think we could be talking still of about a 4-0 team, but that's in the past now. Justin Fields is playing better, and with the Steelers needing a bounce-back game, especially from that defense, and the Cowboys being pretty one-dimensional, I feel like I like the Steelers more in this game. The next couple of games for the Cowboys are rough, so they have more of an incentive to win this one, but I just feel like they're down too many players in Pittsburgh as well. I like the Steelers to win and move the 4-1, while the Cowboys fall to 2-3. Vikings. It says the Jets are at the Vikings, but both of these teams will be playing in London. Kickoff is at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So we're gonna have to get early to see this game. It's definitely one you don't want to miss for a couple of reasons, right? The Sam Darnold revenge game in this matchup, right? The team that drafted him, the team that gave up on him, the team that didn't support him well enough and just, gave up on him. As simple as that. Now look at him, right? Now look at Sam Darnold and where he's at, leading one of the only undefeated teams still in the NFL in 2024. You couldn't have wrote this script and have people believe you back when Sam Darnold was drafted. You just couldn't convince anybody that this was going to be the case. But this is where we are now. The Sam Darnold revenge game is what we're going to see in this game. The Jets coming off of an ugly loss like we talked about to the Broncos, and ugly as well after the game, talking about this nonsense about cadences and Garrett Wilson and what he said and how we talked about that. It's a weird spot to just be with the Jets, right? Because they're only 2-2, and it feels like they're like 1-3 or something with some of the things that were said afterwards. But I guess that's what you get with being in New York, right? It's a lot crazier there with the expectations. And, I just feel like in this game, it's going to come down to which team sort of executes on their game plan a lot better. How well does that defense play against Aaron Rodgers? Can the Jets clean up their penalties and not harm themselves in this game? Because if they do that, they're going to beat themselves, and then the Vikings are just going to beat up on them a lot more with how well they play. So it's an interesting matchup, Sam Darnold against Aaron Rodgers, and I just feel like right now, looking at this game, I know it's in London, the Vikings are playing as good as anybody. Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell especially, and even Brian Flores, are both coaching arguably better than anybody in the NFL. So that's why I like the Vikings in this game. They haven't really shown me anything where I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe, like, that could go wrong. I haven't really seen too much of that. So I like their chances against the Jets in this one. The Jets are still trying to figure things out. So give me the Vikings. Then we talked about this matchup with the Ravens and the Bengals just now. I went with the Ravens just for the idea that the Bengals defense doesn't really convince me too much. So I'd like the Ravens to go on the road, continue their dominance with Derrick Henry, and win this matchup and go to 3-2 on the year, win 3 games in a row, and have a positive record for the first time this year. Then the next game, the second to last one here, a divisional matchup between the Colts and the Jaguars. It's going to be the second AFC South game for both of these teams. Both of these teams have already played the Houston Texans, and they've lost to the Houston Texans as well. But the Colts, on the positive side of things, have done very well to rebound with big wins against the Bears. Their defense played well, and against the Steelers just now, getting a big win without their starting quarterback. So and they have some players injured, so they don't have their full roster back yet. So that's pretty exciting to kind of hold off on. And it's been the opposite with the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Hasn't looked clean. It looks like they just lack the game plan, the execution, and really the personnel to compete in a lot of these games. But it could be as dire of a situation as it is in Week 5, because I mentioned the Bengals being 1-4 and how bad that could be. If the Jaguars are 0-5 after suffering another loss in the division as well, it could be as bad of a spot for anybody. If they're 0-5 and they're 0-2 in the division, if that happens, Coach Peterson may lose his job right after that game, and they might just pack it up, honestly, right after this game. If they start 0-5, 0-2 in the division, they might just close up shop, and that'll be it for the Jaguars in 2024, honestly, because the Colts could be 3-2. I know the Titans are 1-3, so it's not that far off, but still, I can't imagine them just completely flipping it and going the other way. So that could be something to watch out for, and that kind of alludes to my picking the Indianapolis Colts in this game. I was impressed a lot by watching them last week. Their offensive line, very, very good. The Lions are the best one in my opinion, but the Colts offensive line isn't talked about as much as it should be. They're a very impressive unit to get past, and also the game planning from Shane Steichen, the running game from Jonathan Taylor as well, and Anthony Richardson when he's in there. If they could just clean up some of the self-harm mistakes and be a little bit more accurate, they're on the right path, certainly. And Anthony Richardson also needs to stop taking all those hits, because he got hurt basically twice against the Steelers, and that's going to help nobody. So I like their chances here. I'm assuming Anthony Richardson will play, so I think they're going to have enough, and they're going to move to 3-2 as well on the year. And lastly here, 2 situations, right? Talking about bad situations, we have another divisional game, the Dolphins and the Patriots, in this one tied for last place in the AFC East. So there's clearly a lot to clean up on both of these sides. The efficiency on offense, the Patriots just losing their center, David Andrews, for the entirety or the rest of 2024. Miami's still figuring out what the heck they're doing at quarterback. Not a lot of positives to take from either of these teams through the first 4 weeks, and the loser of this game is going to be solely in last place of that division. So you can't help but think, right? Like, are we playing to get a win here, or are we playing for draft position now? Honestly, we're not talking about, we're talking about tanking now, right? But you can't help but think of that way, right? Because the Dolphins, what is Tua going to be when he comes back, right? And where are the Patriots going to be if they win this game anyway, right? Are we going to think that they're going to flip the script or anything like that? Probably not. Both of these teams are 1-3 in this divisional game, so as much as teams want to get the win, and it would help like a young head coach like Gerard Mayo, right? Are we playing to really win this game and, try and get to 500 or something like that? Or are we playing for draft positions now, right, this early? Nobody wants to say it, but everyone's starting to think it with some of these teams. So, that's the situation we face here. I'm not sure that they have more to give, talking about the Patriots here. So we're going to see both of these quarterbacks sort of, I don't want to say it also, but kind of be teed off on, because Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, is very aggressive. I'm sure they're going to pressure Jacoby Brissett and that offensive line. And likewise, Gerard Mayo on the other side, they're going to pressure the heck out of Tyler Huntley as well. It's just going to be which team gets themselves in better situations and can execute it, and maybe win. This game could end up being like 12-9 or something like that. With that being the case, though, I'm going to go with the Dolphins to win this one. They just have better skill players, better talent to lose again. As bad as they looked, and they looked really bad on Thursday, or on Monday, excuse me, they have Tyreek Hill, they have Jalen Waddle, and their defense still has very impressive players. The Patriots' defense is very good, but offensively, I think the Dolphins should be able to produce a little bit more because they have better weapons simply. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins, and that's all the 6 games that we have, and that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Thank you guys for sticking to the end here. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well, and follow the network on all forms of social media. If you want to catch more of this show, check out both YouTube channels for a lot more content around the NFL in a variety of different ways, not just full shows, but different ways to watch all the topics we talked about on the show. And lastly, make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions, coverage of the NFL with me, Manny Mardiege, as your host. Go out, watch the football game, come back tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're going to discuss everything and our reactions from tonight's game between the Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit.